Hey Instagram, it's Dr. Rick, and today's unboxing is on Vivo barefoot shoes. So I'm gonna hear flack from my foot doctors, and understood, but in the running community, there's a growing faction that is embracing barefoot running. So I think I've done videos in the past on inserts, plantar fasciitis, knee pain. But listen, the new information it's always evolving. Science is always evolving. It's not like you're really refuting anything from before. You're just adding it and fine tuning it. These are Vivo barefoot shoes. They come from England, and this is how they look. Pretty cool. Obviously they're called barefoot shoes because if you look on, I don't think you can see anything on the inside, but there is no support, essentially no support. I mean, there's protection in case you walk on a nail or have some pebbles that you have to go under. But aside from that, look at that. The traction and the treads are really thick. There is this thing that looks like an arch, but again, there's very little support here. So the difference between the height of the heel and the height of the forefoot. But the bottom line with regards to running is that I was always a sprinter. I'm still a sprinter. I like burst activity. I have done marathons in the past, 2 of them. And I ended up walking, and I definitely do long distance hiking and altitude hiking. So shoe wear is very important. And being in sports medicine, we know that there's kinetic chain. So there's something called the kinetic chain that goes from your foot to your knee, to your hip, to your back, to your neck, and to your head. And sometimes if you're a say, tennis player, it'll even go up to the hand. You can't see me up here, but the hand and the top of the racket. So that's called the kinetic chain. And I took care of somebody at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs once, and something was off. I was just visiting, but something was off in the patient, and they couldn't figure out what was going on, so we had to look at the kinetic chain. From the toe, there's the toe that drags when you go up for a serve, and between the toe that dragged, and she had a huge callus, to the top of the racket, there's something that was off that caused the pain, and we figured it was probably, me and the doctor that was running the clinic, figured it was probably something of a callus in the foot. So eventually they shaved down the callus, they looked at her kinetic chain, they looked at her form, and the pain went away. So it's very important to understand that there's kinetic chain. It's not just, there's knee pain, so attack the knee, which is the lazy way to do it. I bring you that story because I have a lot of people that are doing marathons, ultra marathons, century rides, and there's overuse. And when there is overuse, you're going to have localized pain. Usually, for example, in a rider, a cyclist, there's going to be iliotibial band syndrome where you have pain to the outer hip down to pain to the knee on the outside. There's going to be knee pain in your runners. The triathletes who have to go water to concrete to bike, they'll have foot overuse issues. So there's a lot of different things going on. My hikers will have problems with their feet, plantar fasciitis, as I mentioned. So there's a lot of regular sports medicine injuries that are common that we as sports medicine doctors see in the clinic, bread and butter stuff. And what do? We usually, the fast way is usually inject, x-ray, and send to physical therapy. I'm hoping that physical therapy will do a gait evaluation when they watch you as you're walking. It's sometimes impractical in Chicago, but I think there's a lot of value in looking at the root cause. We always talk about root cause, whether it's integrative medicine or sports medicine. And if you look at somebody in their natural stance, or when they're walking, when they're hiking with their boots and using their sticks, when they're running at speed for a sprinter, you should be able to record it and see the defect. If you identified a defect, you can fix the defect. If you fix the defect, and there might be a couple, but if you fix the defect, you should take care of the suffering and the pain and inflammation. So if you can't get that taken care of, then you go to MRIs, which essentially are a roadmap for the surgeon. And nothing against my orthopedic surgeons. I think they do great things. But sometimes we jump straight at orthopedics and big stuff versus looking at the nitty-gritty. But, I mean, this is insurance-based medicine. Who has time to look at nitty-gritty, right? Anyway, barefoot running. So as a sprinter, and if you guys are sprinters, CrossFit, you will know that it's a faster and springier access if you always take off the ball of your feet. So in my thinking back in the 80s, I used to think sprinters walk around on the balls of the feet, distance runners walk around on the heels. That's not right. Actually, everybody walks around and sprints on the ball of their feet. That's forefoot striking. So the balls of your feet are here, that are metatarsal heads, and forefoot striking is supposed to be what happens. You're supposed to come down like this, take off. Again, the theory is in long distance running, you come down on your heels and you roll, which if you slow down the recorded runs of a lot of people, they won't do that. They'll do that when they get fatigued, but typically they come down like this and take off. So if you think about it, again, understanding the kinetic chain goes from the foot to the knee, to the hip and above. If you were to take every step landing this way, this is the theory that a lot of barefoot runners agree with. Imagine if everybody came down heel strike first, and that would be on grass, turf, but also on concrete, heel striking. When you heel strike and you weigh, and you're bad with your posture and you're tired from an 8-hour shift and you work on concrete and you have boots that don't give, that every strike that you have is that weight being translated from the heel to the knee to the hip. That kind of weight, or 1,600 strikes in a mile. Imagine if you do 10,000 strikes in a day. You're constantly hitting this thing and you're jarring every joint above it. That will lead to overuse and wear and tear. I theorize that some of my runners, I'm working with one ultramarathoner, Ironman, and he's got this knee problem that just swells up all the time. I don't think that's age. I think that, well, I mean, age has to be incorporated into the formula, but I think it's because of the type of running, the surface that he's training on, and the fact that he's not keeping up all the time. So sometimes when you go into pulsed activities, those times, those down times when you don't exercise, you know, the endurance gets poor. I mean, he's an Ironman, so his poor endurance is like my best. But the endurance gets poor, so the fatigue will set in faster. And when the fatigue sets in, like an 8-hour shift, your posture is worse. You collapse things fast. Let me just put it this way. Imagine you're doing a squat or a deadlift. And in a squat or a deadlift, you either depend on the belt that you're using or your form. Imagine doing a squat and a deadlift all day long. Eventually, you're going to be tired out because the core fails. The weakest link will always fail first. And when the weakest link fails, the link above it and below it will have to endure more work. That makes sense. Well, think of it this way too. The foot also has a core. There's a core right here. There's a ton of little tiny muscles in the foot. I mean, it has to serve us for 100 years. Well, in the United States, it's probably serving us for 60 plus years because of other medical diseases. But if you think of this core and all the muscles here, this core has to be able to translate the power and impact and tolerability of the heel to the finesse and takeoff and explosion of the forefoot. So that core is really important. And in theory, when you rely on an insert to take the brunt of your, this is an instep here. So if you rely on the insert, let me get the other one, to take the brunt of your force and keep your arch up, that's fair if you have pathology like I did. But if you don't train those core muscles of the foot, then you're going to be relying on this thing forever. Just like a belt. If you don't train the core muscles of your abdomen and your trunk and your back and your obliques, you're going to be relying on the belt that you use forever. And that's fair if you're competing, but once you start to increase the weight, increase the challenges to the torso and the lower extremity, if that core isn't developed and it's only relied on this thing or a weight belt, you're going to have, it's an injury awaiting to happen. So bottom line is that I think that in most cases, follow the doctor that you're going to and get the advice. Hopefully they're thinking outside the box. If they have to make an orthotic, then they have to make an orthotic. But my contention is that you might want to try, not on your own, but you might want to try changing your footwear. So this is where if you change your footwear just a little bit every day at a time, now don't get a barefoot running platform and do a marathon the first day, but the theory is if you change your footwear and you start to work the core of the foot, just like me taking off the weight belt and starting to work my core, eventually the core, whether it's here or here, will develop endurance, will develop some springiness, will be a link between the heel and the forefoot, or between the torso and the legs, and you'll be able to union everything together to make a complete kinetic chain. So again, if you work the core and it develops in unison with the torso and the legs, you'll have a complete kinetic chain that's bulletproof from foot to head. If you work the core and the foot and it links, go through the endurance, it goes through the power, it gets used to your pulsed activities, it can link the heel and the forefoot together, and you will fix this kinetic chain to not have pain anymore. Pain in the form of plantar fasciitis, pain to the insertion of the plantar fascia to the 5 metatarsal heads, pain to just the metatarsal areas. Mine was more pain to the plantar fascia and to the first MTP, metatarsophalangeal joint. So everybody expresses it differently. Sometimes even a hammer toe in the front, it can be fixed by changing your footwear. Again, the theory is that the more cushion you put, these are my old guys, these are Under Armours and they're super cushiony. In fact, it's like walking on and running on a pillow, which kind of serves you, but think of this, I'll leave you with this. The bottom line is that the thicker the cushion, the harder you're going to come down on the surface, and the less you're going to rely on developing the core muscles. The thicker my belt, the stronger the belt, the tighter you wrap the belt, the harder you're going to lift. If that analogy between the core here and the core in the foot makes sense. So my contingency is to try it a little bit at a time, develop it over the course of time. Always go back to your old shoes, but try a little bit of barefoot exercise, walking, and listen to your body. If your foot says, that's too much, then you get your shoes back on. But if you can kind of develop, and there's other exercises you can do. My ultra marathoner, is going to get a gait analysis from his friend just to see where the striking is, especially after getting fatigued. So if we find that there used to be this guy in high school, I forgot his name, Bruce something, and we used to run in the hallways in wintertime in New Jersey to prepare for track and field. And you can hear this guy slap, slap, slap. He could come around and he was hitting really flat. And whether that was his style, and he was a 400 hurdler, whether that was his style or whether he was just fatigued by the time we heard him, number one, don't run on hard surfaces like that. Number two, wear the proper shoes, whether it's this or protected shoes. Number three, get some coaching. So if we're young, we can probably have a lot of resiliency. But if you're old like me, 58 going on 59, it's important you don't injure yourself. Expect some aches and pains as you adjust to the new shoes. Please listen to your foot doctor or your sports medicine doctor. But I think it's worth it if you're suffering from iliotibial band syndrome, hip pain, knee pain, even low back pain. I think before you go for the big injection, if you're leaning towards MRI and everything has failed, have somebody do a gait analysis. Get a running club. They usually know who's good with evaluating gaits. Or you can try it on your own, but I don't suggest that. It has a disclaimer. This is not meant to be medical advice. So please take the information, research on your own on PubMed, and take this to your doctor. If your doctor doesn't know what he's talking about, go to an orthopedic specialist that's good in running. If they don't know, ask local running groups about who they like to refer to. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of an idea. Go on over to YouTube because I do videos every couple days. Subscribe to me there, maybe a thumbs up. Otherwise, put your comments down below, and happy holidays. I'll see you at the next video.